Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Cafe for today, Wednesday, May 1st, 2019. And my name is Marc Sabatella. I'm the Director of Education for MuseScore, and this is a weekly series of live, if you are watching live, chats that I do. They're interactive if you want to participate in the chat if you're online. I pick a topic and kind of talk about it, take any questions, comments. We can go other places if people want. But the topic that I picked for today is jazz. Because I'm a jazz musician and I talk about that a lot, but I don't actually talk about them that much in these cafes, maybe some. But yesterday was International Jazz Day. So it's a good time to talk about jazz. And so I want to talk about some of the features in MuseScore that are relevant to jazz and how people might use MuseScore in a jazz setting, and also a little bit about, I don't know, the nature of jazz, just because there's a lot of, if you're not a jazz musician, there's sort of a lot of questions a lot of people have about the process. And if, MuseScore is notation software for creating written music, but jazz, we improvise. And what is the actual relationship here? So, hey, Colleen. That's interesting to talk about. And so I actually kind of want to start talking about that topic a little bit. I'm just going to play you a sample of a piece of that I wrote entitled Unclaimed Gift. The title is a reference, Bill Evans was a jazz pianist, one of my personal heroes, and this was sort of a dedication to him, but he had died long before I knew who he was, shortly before I knew who he was, long before I wrote the piece. So the piece uses, I'll talk about the composition aspect of it as well as then, what I would do in MuseScore with it. So this is a performance of this with a friend of mine, Jeff Miguel. So I'm just going to play a bit of it and I'm going to skip around. All right, I'm going to pause it there. That was the composition itself, Unclaimed Gift. That whole piano introduction there was me freely interpreting a portion of the melody, and then everything that Jeff just played on saxophone was part of the written composition. And so I'm going to load that score for you so we can take a look at it. If I'm thinking ahead, I might have had that happening already. But I'm always, as you have probably realized if you've watched these before, I'm just largely winging it here. So lead sheets, Unclaimed Gift. Oh, good, I do have that. So I'm gonna take this to, this isn't the thing, but I'm gonna show you. Beautiful. All right, so this is Unclaimed Gift loaded into MuseScore 3. And there's a couple things that I can tell you already, since I want to talk about jazz, but I want to talk about MuseScore specifically. This collision, there was originally this chord and this chord in MuseScore 2. I had spaced them, or MuseScore used to automatically space things to avoid this. With MuseScore 3, the algorithm changed so that it would raise the chord above rather than respace the measure. Well, that's not really good. So it's already the case, I hope, we'll find out shortly, should be the case that in MuseScore 3.1, which we're getting ready to release, that same score will automatically respace. So we're going to find that out in a moment here. Score 2 scores. So chord symbols are like a huge part of life as a jazz musician. And so how they get handled is very kind of important. Yeah, so as you can see in MuseScore 3.1, the measure is automatically stretched out so that these chords don't have to stack on top of each other. So that was something that was sort of a little step backwards in MuseScore 3. Sometimes we spaced the measure out automatically if there was a note underneath this chord, without getting into detail. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but now it should work much more often. And it didn't always work in MuseScore 2 either. It basically required the chords to be in the same measure, and I think that's still going to be the case. So anyhow, we have, since it looks funny in there, it looks better in MuseScore 3.1. We're going to look at it in MuseScore 3.1. The normal way that we often write a composition in jazz is with a melody and then symbols for the chords. And so if I go back to my piece, starting wherever he picks up the saxophone, right there. So you're going to hear this melody. Yeah, I can't keep up. So the idea is that the melody is being played, I am interpreting these chord symbols. And so these chord symbols, how they appear, is a very important part of jazz, because we need them to be readable, we need them to convey the right amount of information, to allow me as the pianist to express what I want to do. So the way that you put together a jazz chart is very different from the way you want to create a lead sheet. The best thing to do is I type Control N or File New to start a new score, and then jazz lead sheet right here. And if you select that as your type of score, it's going to set up a number of things for you. Actually, I didn't add a title, but let me just do that now. So one of the things it does is it uses this font, the Muse Jazz font, that's based on a series of fake books called the New Real Book. The text characters look very much like the characters from the New Real Book. So we have the Muse Jazz font here, and which, by the way, there was the New Real Book was handwritten. Like the notation itself was done in software, but then I think, now I'm not remembering, but all the chords and everything were written in by hand. And I actually went to school with one of the women who did that work, and Chuck Scher was teaching where I was as well at UC Berkeley. So I have a little insight. I was proofreading some of those original charts way back then. And then also it turns out that I ended up working on the other major fake book series in jazz, the Real Book. So I had a tiny role with the New Real Book, but in the current Real Book series from Hal Leonard, I actually had a fairly large role in producing volumes 2, 3, and 4 of that. So yeah, I know a thing or two about putting together jazz charts and the engraving of them. So one of the things it does is it creates this Jazz lead sheet template gives you this font, and it also means when you enter chord symbols, they're going to use that font also, but with all this fancy formatting too. So I'm going to type Control K to type a chord symbol, and then I can type C7, say, for a chord symbol. And as I type, or maybe C7 flat, lowercase b for flat 9. When I type it, you just see a C, a 7, a B, and a 9. But as soon as I press a key, I'll just press escape to leave note entry mode, you'll see that it automatically reformats itself. It superscripts the 7, it superscripts the flat and the 9, and makes them smaller also. So there's some automatic formatting that takes place in the Jazz lead sheet template. You don't have to use the Jazz lead sheet template. You can, because if I just type Control K, C7, flat 9 in the standard score, the B turns into a flat sign, but you don't get the superscripting or anything else. But if you have a score that didn't start from one of the Jazz templates, you can go to Format, Style, Chord Symbols, and tell it to use the Jazz style. And when you do that, you'll see that you get that Jazz style. They're still smaller than they were in the Jazz lead sheet template, because the Jazz lead sheet template sets up a number of things, not just that. But that's certainly one of the main things that it does. So that's that. The Jazz lead sheet template made the chord symbol a little bigger. It made the whole notation a little bigger also. If you compare the size of this to this, it's slightly larger, but also you can see the clef and everything is actually in this handwritten font. That's new in MuseScore 3. You don't have to wait for 3.1. It's in MuseScore 3 already. And again, the Jazz lead sheet and all the Jazz templates, there was a Jazz lead sheet, a Jazz combo, and a Jazz big band. The templates all set that up for you, but this also is a style setting, format, style, right here. These two settings here control what font is used for things like the clefs and so forth, and musical text font controls what's used for things like, I think it basically controls dynamics and one or two other things. They're things that are sort of automatic. They're not just plain regular text, but they're not, but they're sort of regular text. I don't know, dynamics like MP, MF, that's the main example I can think of actually. So these two settings here, you set MuseJazz and MuseJazz text, you can convert anything to look more like a Jazz lead sheet. So if I go to Format, Style, and change these guys to MuseJazz, and this will automatically change to MuseJazz text, then you get that. And so if I now enter some dynamics, I think, yeah, I get the Jazz font there, MuseJazz font for the dynamics. Notice it didn't affect all the existing text, all the other text you might enter. So text, this is special text, right? It's text that came directly from the palette. It has special meaning. But if I enter my own text with Control T, is how you enter staff text, it's still just going to be in regular font. So you would have to go to Format, Style, Text Styles, and then take any of these you want to be in MuseJazz font and set them. So if you use the lead sheet template or any of the Jazz templates, all of these get set to the MuseJazz font automatically. Now it comes up as a question sometimes, well, what if I don't want to have to I don't want to use that template, but I sure don't want to have to go one by one to every single one of these styles and change it to use MuseJazz. Well, there is a way to accomplish this. What you do is create a score using the template, and it's already got all of those styles set. So if you see the title is in that, and if I go Control T here for staff text in the Jazz lead sheet template shows up below the staff, because we don't want it to get in the way of chord symbols, basically. So there's a lot of customizations in these Jazz templates. If you go to Format, Style, Text Styles, you'll see all these things are already set to MuseJazz, MuseJazz text. I think they all are. It's possible we added something after we created the template, and maybe I'm missing one. And I know there's a glitch. Nope, I guess that's not the case. Everything is MuseJazz. So this we might want to just reuse those settings. So what you can do is you can go to Format, Save Style. And this is going to save a style file. Now, I've already created several style files here, but if I want to create one, did I already create one called Jazz? I did create one called Jazz. Let me just rewrite it here because I don't know what's in it. I might have customized it. Let me just rewrite it with Jazz. I can now go to any other score I want and just load that style. So in fact, unclaimed gift here. Notice it was created in MuseScore 2 before we had the fancy Muse Jazz font for clefs and things. So I can load that style into this score and instantly get that look. Or I can take my original score where I made that change, but I hadn't changed all my other texts, and do the same thing. Format, load style, Jazz. And all my text is now changed. So if you're creating jazz charts, having these style settings is really useful. And it's not just about text. Let me point out a couple other differences here. I think I need to undo some of this stuff. Okay, yeah, there we go. Notice things like how thick that bar line is. When I'm redoing these changes now. When it changed to the Muse Jazz font, the bar lines got thicker. That's a style setting that goes with that as well. And you can also change these style settings individually. You go to Format, Style, bar lines, and these are the settings that control the thickness of bar lines and things. So in the Muse Jazz font, when you switch to the Muse Jazz font, there you automatically get some of these changes and some other changes though that the Jazz lead sheet template does to further customize things. So there's a lot of settings there. So if you use the template or you use that style setting or you change your font to Muse Jazz, you get some of these things. The thicker bar lines, that might not seem like a big deal. You might not think thick bar lines are important, but one of the things to realize about jazz is a lot of it is sight read. I mean, literally, like performing as a professional jazz pianist, I can't tell you how many times I have sight read a tune that I've never seen before, played it professionally right there on the gig. And there's a lot of things that you do to make the music easier to sight read. That's one of the reasons we typically make it a little bigger. It's not only that it's being sight read, but it's typically sight read in poorly lit jazz clubs. And often smoky, at least, Colorado, we banned smoking in clubs a while ago, which is great because that was really getting to me. But so it really conditions that are not amenable to good reading, you would have to read. And so we take a lot of things like making things bigger, making certain strokes thicker than we otherwise would, that are designed to make the sight reading go a little better, basically, at the expense of maybe taking up more space on the page. So the templates there, the style settings, these all do some of this stuff for you automatically, so you get kind of a nice look to your jazz charts. Feels like I was going to say something else about that, but I lost my train of thought, so sorry about that. Talking about sight reading, the ease of sight reading, who knows. If I go to my chart here, you can see this flag is really thick. That's just to emulate handwriting, but it's also something that people do is deliberately make certain strokes thicker than others and other strokes thinner in an effort to make things perhaps easier to sight read is the goal. So so this was my lead sheet, and the lead sheet means we basically have the melody here. And then at the end of the melody, there's a notation that says solo over form. That means we start improvising. And we're going to improvise by following the same chord progression. If I go back to the recording, starting around here. We go back to the top. Now he's improvising. So there's a playing of the melody where the whoever's playing the melody, in this case Jeff on saxophone, plays the melody, and the pianist plays the chords. If there's a bass player, they'll also be, or a guitar player, they'll also be representing these chords somehow. So the typical thing that happens in a jazz lead sheet type of format is you play the melody, accompanied by the chords, and then you start improvising over those chords. And so we want the chords to be really visible. That's why they're as big as they are. And so this basic format where you just have a melody and chord symbols, and then we just know, okay, play the melody accompanied by the chord symbols, and then start improvising over those chord symbols, and then at the end play the melody again. Well, that's a pretty common way to do a jazz performance. But often we want a little more than that. Maybe we want an arrangement where there's a particular introduction. You may remember I had that piano introduction to this piece. That was me playing, starting right here, playing a little more freely. I wasn't in strict tempo. And even though I was really just reading, well, I wasn't reading, I have it memorized, but I was just playing from this. I didn't write out every note that I played. I was really just playing this note and that chord symbol. The reality is I actually did work out exactly how I was going to play every single note there, how I was going to play that A major 7 chord over each of those melody notes. I did that. I don't always do that. I don't normally do that. But as I mentioned, this was a tribute to Bill Evans, and I wanted this to sound as much like Bill Evans as possible. So the beginning, everything that I did, all the voicings, all the things that I did at the very beginning were worked out to use devices that I learned from listening to Bill Evans. So I'm going to just play a little bit of that for a second. So everything about how I played those chords is totally worked out to use the same types of methods that Bill Evans would have played. And in fact, more than that, I actually arranged that whole thing for for jazz big band also. So if I come here, do I know where that is? I really have no idea, unfortunately, where that version of the score is. I should. That would be useful. In fact, I know where it is. It's on MuseScore.com. I want to post those links. So if I'm going to use this example, I might as well. Let's see what happens if I just type this into the search box. Do I get my own thing? Yes, I do. All right, good. So here's Unclaimed Gift. Is this my big band arrangement? Yeah, looks like it is. So, starting this from the beginning. So that's actually done in MuseScore 1. So that was a while ago. That's why I wasn't finding it in my MuseScore 2 folder. And it was therefore using the MuseScore 1's sound font, which is pretty rinky-dink. So I kind of feel like I want to get this guy into Unclaimed Gift. That'll be good enough. This is the big band version. I will add that. So my big band version here, I just downloaded from MuseScore.com, and now I can load this puppy. And have it to work with in MuseScore. So this was created using the Jazz Big Band template. It was created using the MuseScore 1 version of it. So it didn't have a lot of the features that we even had in MuseScore 2. But in any case, so that's yeah, it didn't have we didn't have the Muse Jazz font when I created it, or it didn't come over right. I guess we did have the font, but when we import scores that old, we don't always get all the font stuff right. But I should be able to do the same thing of saying format, load style, jazz. Now when I do this, I'm going to get, now it's going to make the staff bigger because this was actually the Jazz lead sheet font, which had big text there. And I guess it still doesn't get all the text, because I think what I need to do is select all this text and then go to the inspector, F8 to display the inspector, and tell it to remove custom formatting, because MuseScore 1 did not have the concept of text styles. It didn't have that notion that you could just change one setting and all your tempos would automatically get updated. So unfortunately, we didn't have that ability. So yeah, there's a number of things about importing MuseScore 1 files that will require more manual fix-up to get things working the way you would want. But in any case, that's my big band score. So the big band score, you can see everything's all written out. This is essentially what I played on the piano, but it's now scored for the instruments. So I wrote this all out just like you would write out an orchestra arrangement or anything else. Let me make this smaller to, so if I go, right now, since I loaded the jazz style, that was actually the lead sheet style, so now it's got big staves, and now I can't fit them all on the page anymore. So what I should do is also create a jazz big band style that I can load. But let me just go to page settings. Did I do it? Or is it just being slow? Just being slow. Okay. And I'm just going to shrink this guy down until it fits. There. Now I can see it fits. I'll hit OK. And I'm good to go. So there we go. So now that it all fits on the page, you can see that everything is all written out, except the piano part and the guitar part still just uses chord symbols, uses more of a lead sheet type of format. That's pretty common. So one of the things that happens then is, like right here, the saxophones here have the melody, and then there's chords to be played here. Well, MuseScore doesn't play back chord symbols. But if you listen to the playback of this, you'll hear something. Well, you can't really hear because the bass isn't turned up, but I actually did create two bass parts. See, I have one bass part here where I just entered the chord symbols and slashes. Oh, slash notation. Let's talk about that. That just indicates do whatever you want. Not whatever you want, but do what's appropriate. Create accompaniment. If it says solo above this, then it means start improvising over those chords. But if it lacks the word solo and you're the pianist, you know it just means play chords to accompany what other people are doing here. So we like to fill these measures with slashes or with this that tells me a specific rhythm to play. Play the B minor 7 on the first beat, the F7 there on the and of 3, the E7 sus on the and of 4, and so forth. So here it just says do whatever rhythms you want. Here it says play that exact rhythm. So we have facility to do that. To fill a measure with slashes, you select it and go to Tools, Fill with Slashes. And now we've got slashes in that measure. Or if you've already entered some notes and you now just want to say, you know what, I don't need you to play those exact notes, I just want you to play that rhythm. So if for some reason, like if this had been, if I wanted to enter this rhythm, yeah, I'll just pick this one, why not? Say that I want the pianist to play this rhythm, but I want the pianist to provide their own chord voicings, then I can go to Tools, and instead of fill with slashes, toggle rhythmic slash notation. And now I get this notation that says play that rhythm, but substitute your own chords. So that's something that's used a lot in jazz as well. But if I'm going to undo those changes. I'm going to go to the mixer, and that's F10, and I'm going to solo just the piano. So solo the piano. So we're only going to hear the piano right now. There's nothing to hear. These chord symbols don't play back. The only time you're going to hear anything is when I actually gave the piano notes. There's no playback for the chord symbols. Well, if you were watching the, if you checked out the Café from some point a few months ago, you may recall that I posted a score. I guess I want all my scores. I posted a score that had like a cheat sheet for playback of chord symbols. That's actually pretty cool. It's pretty useful. So let me show you that. So in this, all I have to do is scroll to the appropriate place, like F minor 7 flat 5 was the first chord, and I'm going to scroll to the F chords and find F minor 7 flat 5. And in a jazz setting, we normally would actually do we add ninths and things. So I actually wrote the chord symbol that way. So I might just select a couple beats worth. Oh, I can't do it in here, of course. I have to do it in MuseScore. But let me post that link while I'm thinking of it. Chord symbol playback. Okay, I guess I didn't hit copy after all. That's some debugging I was doing recently. Actually, not even debugging, was implementing a new thing. But so let's try that again. All right, so if I load my chord symbol playback, which I have here, I can do things like select that B, that F. Oh, I can even go Control F, F. So Control F is the search facility, and I planted rehearsal letters in there according to, so each page has the letter of, you know, that chord. So this is the page with all the F chords. So Control F for find, and then F takes me right to the F page. And now I can see if I want a whole measure of the F minor 7 flat 5, I can just copy and paste this measure. Or if I just want this much of it, I can have, there we go, copy just 2 beats worth, and then I can go to my arrangement and just paste that in to the piano part where the F minor 7 is. And so since I selected 2 staves, really, let me not do that. What I really want to do is add a new instrument. I'm going to add another piano. And the reason I'm going to add another piano is so that we can hear the playback of it, but then I'll make it invisible when I'm done, after I've entered all the notes into it. So here's my piano, and now I can come here and paste in my F chord, and then I can go here and Control F B to find the B's and B flats. Oh, I guess I didn't put in rehearsal letter for the flats. Oh well, but at least gets me to the ballpark. And then I wanted a B flat 7, but not just a plain B flat 7. In the jazz world, we're going to want that kind of sound with the flat 9s and flat 13s. So I select that, copy, come here, and paste. So now, except I pasted this totally in the wrong spot. I can see that by the chord symbols. So I'll select all this and go to the right spot, which is right here, and paste all that business. So if I play this now, you'll still just hear, because I soloed only the piano part, but if I go back to the mixer and I also solo the new piano part there, so solo is a misnomer, it can be, you know, as many instruments soloed at once as you want. Now I can hear these things together. Right? So you can create accompaniment by copying pasting from that chord symbol playback file, and you'll get reasonable playback. In this case, the chords didn't connect as smoothly as they could. I actually went to some effort to make it so they would connect smoothly most of the time, but obviously I didn't get that one happening, which is a shame. yeah, I tried to pick places to play this on the piano. This is just entirely too low. I should have transposed that little section higher, basically. So, okay. Um, yeah, and so I should probably update it with a version in which these chords are pushed up a little higher so that they connect more smoothly. But in any case, that's another device you would want to use if you want to hear playback of your chord symbols. It's not easy. I mean, it's easy. It just takes time to copy and paste, basically. I will say there's some chance that, the idea that we would implement chord symbol playback keeps coming up. It probably wouldn't be anything really sophisticated if we ever did it, but it's on the radar. It's the sort of thing that someday, I won't be surprised if you find some future version of MuseScore supports the playback of chord symbols right away. So anyhow, those are some of the features that you use in creating jazz. Oh, one of the other things I'm seeing right here is winged repeats. That was the thing that I was going to have mentioned before that I spaced. So great. I mentioned that there's some things that we do to try to make the music a little more easy to sight read. And one thing is to make it really easy, if there's a repeat, to see where it repeats back to. Because oh my god, I got to find this thing. I wasn't even paying attention when I saw the start repeat before. So by putting these wings on the repeats, the jazz templates do that. But that's also a style you can do yourself. Format, style. Format, style, bar lines. And there's show repeat bar line tips, winged repeats. So that setting there controls, if I reset it, you see the wings go away, and then check it again, and the wings come back. So that's one of the other things that is commonly done in jazz music to make it, again, basically easier to sight read, easier to just see where it's going back to if you haven't already spent time learning the music. So those are some of the things going on. I mentioned also that I want to talk a little bit about the role of improvisation, and I've done that a little bit, but because I took the time to load this score, I want to point out one other thing. That tune is just this 32 bars. Well, technically this one's 36 bars. Or 40 bars, I guess. It's that melody, and then we keep repeating that melody to improvise over. And then typically you just go back and play the melody at the end. But I like to have a little more to my arrangement than that. So I actually wrote out a section of it where I took that melody and made some counterpoint out of it, made essentially a fugue out of it, or a portion of a fugue. So if you go to the video, so I want to post that link to the video. Come over here, give you my link to the video. There's the video. So if I go to that video and I skip towards the end, after I'm done improvising and Jeff puts the saxophone back in his mouth. All right. Here we go. Ow, don't stop. Yeah, let me just go back right to that spot, and this time I'll be ready with the music. So I wrote out this and then I wrote out this other melody here. And so we play that at the end instead of just playing the plain version of the melody. Thanks. All right, well. So you're certainly not limited to saying, oh, well, you got a lead sheet, you just have to play the melody as written. So I had written this as part of the big band arrangement and liked it so much, I'm like, oh, I want to do this in the duet version. So I took the big band version of the fugue that I had written. I mean, that fugue was even, was relatively more impressive. Let's see, I think it's at rehearsal letter R, if I'm not mistaken, or S or something. Go to R. I don't know why that didn't work. Maybe there is not an R. Go to S. Huh. Oh, maybe these aren't rehearsal marks because we didn't have the rehearsal mark thing in MuseScore 1, and this is such an old score that that's the excuse I'm going to use. So I'm just going to go find the dang thing. Oh, I have to unsolo things now. So if I go here and I unsolo the piano, that means now we're going to hear everyone again. Now you get to hear the fugue the way I originally wrote it. So that's the fugue the way I originally wrote it, and then I sort of reduced it down to something that I could play as much as possible of the accompaniment parts to that melody on the piano, and I had to sacrifice some of it, but I mostly was able to play most of it. That I was able to reduce it down that way. One other thing I should mention before I go, because I've gone on long enough here, is when I listened to the playback of that, again, this was created in MuseScore 1 before we had swing playback working the way we do now. So you didn't get to hear it play back that section with swing that should have. So to be honest, yeah, we actually allow you to have both straight and swing playback. So what you can do is you can, from the text palette, add the word swing, and I will just add it at the beginning of the measure. But this is the part actually I want to be straight. I'm going to set the swing off. That way, because I need to go back and add a swing earlier because it looks like I want it to be swing. So now I can just enter the swing text and leave it alone. So what we'll hear now is it'll be straight here, and then it'll switch to swing. Now it's swing. And it's still swing. I could tell it to go back to straight. Really, I don't think I want it to go straight. I think I just did that to show that you could do it, but I could totally take that. Now that I've already made that change, I could already take this and say copy. And at the end of this passage, go Control V for straight. So now you'll hear swing and then back to straight. It still sounds a little swung because the rhythms are inherently the way the syncopations are written. You might not be as aware of the fact that it's not swinging there, but trust me, it's not. So those are some of the things that we do composition-wise. We want to be able to improvise, because that's what we do as jazz musicians. It's, one of the reasons we like jazz. But I would also say there's things that improvisation can give you that you can't get from composing. There's all sorts of like accidents that happen that you would not normally ever plan. That can be wonderful things if you're good at it. If you're not good at it, then they won't be so wonderful maybe. But there's the opportunity for really wonderful things to happen when you're improvising that would never happen if someone just planned the music. There's also just the craving of variety. Every time we play this piece, it's going to be different because the improvisation is different. Well, that's valuable in itself because we want to hear some familiar things and we want to be surprised. So by having this balance between what you've composed in a performance versus what you're improvising, you can have this thing where the audience feels like, oh, I've heard this piece before. Maybe they haven't heard this one before unless they've gone to a lot of my concerts. But you can hear something familiar in a composed melody, but hear something new in it because of the improvisation that goes with it. So we're often looking at how to manage that balance and how to get the things that composition gives you, familiarity from repetition, also some sophistication. You can't improvise a fugue like this and have it work. That's just not going to happen. I mean, yeah, Bach improvised fugues, but you can't improvise a fugue for a whole big band. You can't get 17 people to all improvise a fugue together. And improvising fugues is really hard. But you can get things to happen through arrangement, through composition. You would never get to happen in improvisation, but vice versa also. And so in jazz, we really like to be able to use both of these things. And probably a lot of jazz musicians really spend most of their time just dealing with lead sheets, which is fine. Melody, chord symbols, improvise, and you're good to go. But a lot of us also like to really push arrangements and creating things like that fugue section or other aspects of an arrangement, background figures and things like that, to make things more interesting than you would get just by relying on improvisation to fill out your arrangement. So so that's the beauty of MuseScore, is that it's suited so well both for creating lead sheets like this and having all the nice formatting done automatically, but also the full scoring capabilities of being able to create big band arrangements and things like that. Really makes it just a wonderful tool for the jazz musician, both to facilitate improvisation by giving you nicely formatted lead sheets, but also to facilitate composition by giving you those facilities to create big band arrangements. The one thing I didn't show that I want to just show really briefly, because if I write something down in my notes that I want to show, I'm going to show it. This whole passage here is called a soli. It's just the name for this thing that happens when you have like the whole saxophone section playing the same rhythm but with different pitches, and so it's like a harmonized melody. In MuseScore, you can write that passage all on one staff if you want. Like here, I'm going to show how I might have written that passage. I don't remember if I did this or not, to be honest. I'm going to paste this over here into the trumpets, but now what I'm going to do is select that passage, and I'm going to run this command that says tools, where is it? Implode. And what you see now is it put it all on one staff. This is the opposite of what I would normally do, and so this is meant for a different purpose. This is something that you would do if you're arranging for a choir and you've written all your voices on separate staves, but now you've changed your mind and you want to combine them onto two staves, like put soprano and alto and then tenor and bass. The implode command is great for that. But if you already have your music written that way, and the implode command, because it is designed to work for that case of soprano, alto, tenor, bass, it uses multiple voices. You can see everything's all multicolored here. It'll combine everything into multiple voices. But if you then run the implode command a second time, it will look for opportunities to combine the multiple voices, and now you get just chords. So this is that soli section just for the trumpet. So when you're writing for a horn section like this, trumpet section, saxophone section, whatever, often you write it on one staff because it's convenient to do it that way. But then you want to distribute the notes to the other instruments. So I can do that now using the opposite of implode. which is explode, of course. So I go to Tools, Explode, and now it splits it back out to the 4 staves. So that's something that's used all the time in big band writing, because it's very often that you can have the whole trumpet section or the whole saxophone section do this sort of thing, all play together. So you can write on one staff and then explode it. So that's another useful feature for jazz. That's my my spiel on jazz for you, and jazz in MuseScore. Hope you've found something useful in it. And that said, I think I'm going to get back to other things that I've been doing today. And hope you all have a great week. And if you have any ideas of what you'd want to hear me talk about next time, I am all ears. So thanks, and I will see you later.